Hello and welcome to White Centipede Noise Podcast. I'm Oscar Brummel, and today my guest is William Hutson of the hip-hop and noise-oriented group Clipping, as well as solo noise projects RALE and Tattered Syntax. Clipping is touring Europe this fall, starting November 11th in Utrecht, Netherlands, so be sure to check them out if you're in Europe. If you're a fan of this show, please consider supporting it at patreon.com/whitecentipedeNoise. Not only do you help support this show, but you get access to some really great exclusive WCN TV content. Last week, I aired a second follow-up interview with Sam McKinley of the Rita on the Afterblast series, a 2.5-hour conversation that you can hear on the Patreon. There are a lot of other great benefits of supporting via Patreon, including the Maniac Circle Discord server. An extra special thank you to the heavy sponsors of the podcast, Christoph Ruschak, John Ingram, Tony Stovic, Dries Bernhardt, DF, and those who wish to remain anonymous. Head over to patreon.com/whitecentipedeNoise to see more and support this show.
It's clipping, bitch. What do they need? Powder weed or Adderall, let them in slow. Settle them in. Caliendo when they step in the doors and seeing all the hoes. Cutting coke in the kitchen and cooking over the stove. Ain't wearing none of their clothes and it's closed and it go like that. Never want to have to show the strap, but you got one and it got drums that hold hundreds of bills old and crumbling. Real soldiers humble and huddling around the heaters competing for millimeters like who cocked the biggest, what you got significant. Locked and loaded on Patron and peyote, hallucinating the realest shit going on with the homies. The only way to get over is get your weight up and pray over all of the bodies of water walking killers that's hiding beside the fact of the matter. The guts will splatter at will. Every bunny in the jungle know it's kill or be killed. Come get it.
William, thank you so much for taking the time to meet with me and talk with me.
Yeah, thank you. It's good to meet you, Oscar.
Excellent to meet you too. And before I start asking you questions about all the different stuff that you do, can you just kind of introduce what you do from your words? Because I had a kind of a double take moment at some point where I became aware I was a fan of RALE, and I knew about RALE back in my early noise days, and then I knew about Clipping when Clipping kind of emerged, and it took me several years before I realized that you were both guys, and it was kind of like, whoa, that's the dude from RALE and Tattered Syntax doing like, so can you tell for people who maybe not know one or the other, maybe they know you from Clipping or they know you from your noise, strictly noise works, what you do?
Yeah, I wish I had a better answer or like a more pat answer for that. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've done stuff in a lot of different areas. Clipping really started because I was doing noise and like experimental music and like doing a lot of like free improvisation, electroacoustic stuff. And Jonathan, the other guy in Clipping, he was, he had a band, like an electronic band that was like a pop music breakcore thing called Captain Ahab, and we were living together. And then David was a rapper, and we were all just going to each other's shows, and it was a really sort of diverse, weird scene in LA around then where, around like there were certain venues that were like only one type of thing. And then there was something like The Smell where shows were really multi-genre. And so we started we decided to combine all these things into one thing. At least our three. It largely had to do with maybe a conversation between me and Jonathan, who had lived together for years, and were, in related areas of music, but really not the same scene necessarily, or like thought of. If you're not in LA, you wouldn't necessarily know these two artists were like living together. Sure. They were like roommates and best friends, because like they were very different types of music. But we just sort of decided we wanted to like travel more together. We were like, well, we should think it'd be really like we'd get along really well on tour. It'd be really fun. We like the same shit. We like food and beer and gonna want to go and see the world. Like, what can we do? Like, how can we figure out what we do together? And then so we started just messing around with like we would take like rap acapellas from like 12 inches when they used to make those, and they would have acapellas on them, and then replace the beats with like just like noise influenced industrial stuff. And then David, I've known since I was like in third grade. He's just been my best friend forever. And he heard some of those remixes we did, and he just said, "Can I rap on these? Like, I think we can make a project out of this."
Cool.
So yeah, it was all these. I was like very active in like the noise scene. Like I had a label. I like now defunct. I had a terrible label the music was great, but I was the worst guy to ever run a label. I was just like I'm so disorganized and like never got to the post office on time. I apologize to anyone whose music I put out during those days. It's pretty bleak. Great records though.
Yeah, for sure.
And then so we were all doing stuff for like, we are all like 10 years into making music and releasing it when we formed. So we all have sort of long prehistories to clipping that are very not clipping. They're like not at all like what clipping turned out to be.
When you were starting with the remixes with the acapellas, did you have something in mind like this will go somewhere and be something that we will perform, or was this, did you envision anything of what was going to come?
No, Jonathan always tells the story. So there was a guy, Kyle Mabson, who is very much a fixture in like LA weirdo music, and he and I had done a couple of shows and tapes I always hated this name. It was called Beach Balls, which was actually given to us at our first show because we didn't have a name. John from Health was like, "You guys are called Beach Balls." And we're like, "Ah, shit," and then it stuck. But it was like sort of silly beats. It would be like, the idea was, like a pedestrian deposit, or, there was all these like pedestrian deposit and oscillating innards and Tourette and people like that were doing the sort of ambient into harsh noise and like cutting between them. And we were doing that, but just with like dumb remixes of pop songs we had made. Right. So it would be like, harsh noise and then like kind of a DJ set for like with like pop rap stuff. And I made this one track that Jonathan really, really liked, where it was the acapella to the Whisper song by the Yin Yang Twins. And I had replaced the beat to it. I'd made it like 17 minutes long. And the rapping only came in at the very end, but it was this long, like sample-based and electronic-based, like sort of parody of like lowercase music, like sort of, I don't know if you remember, this was a thing at the time. It was like Richard Chartier, and like there was Line was the label. It was like ultra quiet, clicky, digital music, like just near silence, right? Who was the Trent Wasso was the one of the labels. What was his name? Oh man, but there was this sort of phenomenon of this like ultra quiet. Steve Roden also, this like incredibly quiet, clicky digital music. So it was this barely there track of just like the faintest popping of mixer feedback, and then after 17 minutes of this, the joke was that the Whisper song, they started whispering this filthy rap over the top of it. And so that's when Jonathan was like, "Oh, we should just do that as a project, the two of us." So we started replacing beats, and there would be I think we did like a UGK song, and God, I don't even remember. Just whatever like 12 inches we had sitting around, and we would just they'd each be sort of a different vibe of of industrial.
Yeah. Were they also kind of done in a humorous way?
No, I think we thought we were funny, but we wanted to keep a very straight face, right? Like we didn't want to let on that we thought we were funny, but we thought it was hilarious. But we also wanted to be good and like this is a good idea. But there is something just deeply absurd about doing that. So it would make us giggle, but we would play it live and play it fully straight. And we were not. This was not. We were serious, but we knew it. Sure. It was vaguely humorous.
So then, how did it become? Yeah. So you explained. David. He was like, I should be part of this. So where to go from there?
Yeah, we made one track with him, and then we did a show at Pairspace that was me and Jonathan doing the remixes. We did like 5 or 6. We played like 5 or 6 remixes. And then David came on stage. It's just like a room. He stood there with us, he stood there with us and he rapped the one original we had written. And then like no one had really liked what Jonathan and I were doing. Like none of our friends thought it was like cool. But then people saw that show and they were like, oh, this is you, the three of you, this is the band. And we were like, oh shit, you're right. This is what it is. Fuck these other things.
Yeah. Cool. So the early recordings that I'm familiar with, maybe there's earlier, but the early recordings that I'm familiar with have like really, really strong elements of not just like industrial or kind of like hard stuff, but like straight harsh noise as we know it from the genre, like, like bursts of cracking feedback and a lot of songs built around that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that also came about like that. I think we leaned heavily into that. Like the intro, is just like fast rapping, alternating with just like blasts of cut up noise. And we, I don't know if this makes me sound fucking petulant or whatever, but we'd been like playing around LA and we'd made like 5 or 6 songs that weren't out, but we had like passed them around to people. And then Ex-Military by Death Grips came out and everyone was like, yo, this is the same thing you guys are doing. This is like noise rap. And I was like, it's cool. It's cool. It's very good. I really like it. It is neither noise nor rap in my opinion. It's like a really good rap influenced punk band.
Yeah.
I think they're excellent. And that's the last I ever listened to them because I was like, people compared us to them so much. I've managed to never hear them again because I was like, I don't want any influence. I don't want to even be able to say you can accuse me of anything. Right. But like the intro to Mid-City was like, oh, this is what rapping is and this is what noise is. So I was like, here are the 2 things that I think are actually missing from what you guys are calling noise rap. This is harsh noise. This is what it sounds like. Yeah. This is rap. This is technically difficult, fast rapping. This is rapping with like a history of rap. Like this fits in a lineage. This is like, this is not like, yeah, exactly. It's not like, I sound like an asshole and I sound like I'm being dismissive, but it's like, there's a certain, David comes with a certain set of skills and a certain history that I wanted to show off. Yeah. This is a rapper. He's a real ass rapper.
For sure. And how do you classify the band then and now? Do you care to give it some sort of like specific genre, or do you classify it as one thing or the other?
It's definitely changed a lot. We talk about this all the time because when we made Mid-City, we were all more involved in our other projects, right? And we did not think we thought this was going to be a bizarre like side project for the 3 of us. We did not know it was going to be the thing that we were going to focus on. So it could be incredibly limited, right? Like in the way that when you have a side project and you also have these other like places to express yourself, you can say these are the damn rules. We're sticking to them because this project is really narrow, right? So, and as we started having more fun and like really putting more, I think, into it, a lot of those rules got broken. It used to be there were like no no actual drum sounds, like no sounds of a drum, no drum machines, no real drums,
Right.
all noises, no melodic content, like pitched things, but they had to be noise elements. There were no melodies, right? And we eventually, I think even by the end of making Mid-City, we'd broken a lot of those rules and given up on that. But by the time we were like, we signed to a record label and all that, we were like, no, this is our band now. Then we needed to expand it so that we could do more things and feel like it was more of ourselves were in the project, and we could, expand it to fit all the ideas and all the things we wanted to do.
Yeah. Did you have an audience in mind when you're making that earliest music?
No, nobody, like I said, like nobody liked us. Like even our friends, we were so used to our friends kind of liking our own music, right? David coming from rap, like underground rap, and he was like playing with like a full ass like live jazz band,
Yeah.
And then I was just making, noise, drone, experimental stuff. And like, the harsh noise scene in LA was not thrilled about like a rap project that seemed to be sort of like bastardizing and biting their sounds. And then Jonathan coming from like weirdo, like pop rock, multi-genre stuff, like they didn't understand either the other. I mean, that maybe Jonathan's audience was more receptive to clipping than either mine or David's. I feel like we've been around long enough, we stuck around that like, but I've still accepted that like my like, true believer harsh noise friends are always going to think clipping is, not the, not pure, a little tacky, a little corny.
Well, so I guess I have a question about, it's a really like general stupid question, but like, I guess in the beginning you had your remix kind of experiments that were kind of, somewhat fun or humorous kind of idea of like combination of things, but obviously clipping isn't now, and you're using noise and experimental sounds, not just noise, but lots of experimental sounds in a hip hop context. This is a very open-ended question, but like, why did you choose to use combined noise and hip hop? And like, what does it serve now, at least? I mean, I understand why you maybe chose in the beginning, but what does it serve now?
Yeah, well, I think there's one simple reason, which is just that's what my background was. That's what I could do. Those were the skills I could actually bring. I started really before I was even making music. Jonathan had been making music his whole life. But before I was even making music, I was trained in theater sound design, like sound design plays, which is in a way basically, I mean, if you're interesting and good at it, it's not super far away from composing musique concrète or something like that, right? You're making recordings, editing them together. And so like those skills, I wasn't ever trained as a musician. I had like, I took like 2 years of guitar lessons in high school. And when my guitar teacher left his pedal board at my house for a week to see, why don't you experiment with this? You don't have any pedals. I immediately put the guitar down and plugged the input into the output and thought I had invented something, right? Like I thought I'd discovered noise and no one else ever had, obviously. I had just done something incredibly simple that everyone does, but and then I never touched the guitar again. So my training was theater sound design, which was like field recording, Pro Tools, editing, that kind of stuff. So the simple reason is like that's all I could offer, right? It wasn't necessarily like this is what rap music needs right now. It was more like that's all I can do, and we started this rap group.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other hand, I also think that what we were doing wasn't that new. I mean, it didn't occur to me until we started doing it, but we weren't doing something that wasn't a part of hip hop before. I think, like, obviously you can point to like Public Enemy, Bomb Squad beats.
Yeah.
Right. Are collages of all sorts of different sounds. They're incredibly harsh. They're incredibly aggressive.
Yeah.
And even, just right before us, something like Dialect, where we're like doing noise rap, experimental rap. And I think Blackie, he started a little bit before us, though I wasn't aware of him until we were already a band. So we weren't, I don't think it was, I don't like to say that there was anything particularly innovative about that combination. I like to say that we were just participating in something that has a deep history to it already.
Right. And what about your decisions to like some of your stuff? Well, even some of your early stuff has sampled specific, like pretty well-known, iconic noise or power electronics tracks. And, you continue to work with other artists within the field that have, names that are recognized. Is that maybe part of was that a conscious decision to like kind of also, okay, we're tying it also in with this legacy or this culture?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, certainly we want to point to that, and we want to point to, our history with that. That also came with, in Beach Balls, I had done a lot of, I would lay hip hop acapellas over like classic noise and industrial tracks. Anyway, there's like I like laid a Lil Wayne verse over Black Vomit by Wolf Eyes for a live show once, and I did like a whole remix of an E40 song over a Skinny Puppy track and stuff like that. And I always had this idea of like using that, using noise and power electronics as something to sample in the way that, like, I mean, rap music starts, the early days of rap are making new records out of the records around your house.
Right.
Right. And what I had sitting around was not necessarily old soul records. I had Death Pile,
Right.
So it was an attempt to adapt that idea of early hip hop and where that sampling culture came from to something that was also honest to me and like my history and my background and my taste,
For sure. Do you think that sometimes the term noise is problematic in the sense that it puts people off of hearing certain sounds just for what they are as sounds? Because you know what I'm saying? Like you said, Bomb Squad, we're using noisy elements. Even I think of like the Neptunes, like they're not noisy, but they have like, white noise. Some of their tracks are really minimal and using sounds that could be found in experimental music. But it's never been like, those terminologies have never been used within that, and it's like the biggest pop music in the world.
Yeah.
Do you think sometimes that terminology puts people off directly, and like that maybe there's much more receptiveness to noise possible?
Yeah, well, I do think, I think especially now, I think rap music production, and as a result, because rap music is like the biggest global music, like pop music production has gotten so much weirder, and we expect and accept much more distinct and unique timbral choices in like big pop songs than maybe we did in previous decades. I mean, there's a lot of sound design that is a part of music production now,
right,
in a way that is like really exciting. Just like huge pop stars like like Charlie XCX or something are working with just some of the most brutal sounds occasionally, just insanity, right?
Yeah.
And that's massive pop music on a global scale. So I think hip hop has a ton to do with that because of its electronic nature and its sample based nature, right? I mean, that, and anything that was being made with electronic instruments from the 60s onward, it slowly seeped into the world where, like, I mean, I don't know, growing up, I couldn't even imagine that, like, pop music would have the level of electronic sound design that it does now.
Right.
And so I think when we say noise, we are really pointing to a history and a lineage and a culture, but also not. I think there is noisy stuff that has permeated that maybe, it doesn't have any connection to that culture anymore. It doesn't have any connection, or ever did, right? It's I think it's more like through hip hop that has seeped into, through hip hop and through, like new wave and shit like that, and industrial, has seeped into popular culture, in a way that resembles elements of noise, for sure.
Yeah. What is the group's production, writing, recording process in the current phase?
I mean, it's all over the place. A lot of it is, I mean, we basically make almost everything in Jonathan's studio in his house. So I don't live in, I moved out of LA during quarantine. So I'm up in Northern California right now. Okay. So I have to go down there to work on beats, or I'll put together something, on the computer, and with the idea that, like, we're going to replace every sound, but here's the idea with some soft synths. A lot of the tracks start. We usually say, like, Jonathan's the musical one, really. So it's like Jonathan will have like a music idea or a sound idea for something, and my ideas are usually like a big picture, like, okay, it's this type of a song, and I'll play them like 10 songs in the vibe that I'm thinking of. I'm like, but this sound is going to be replaced by this, and this sound's going to be replaced by this, and imagine it's got a melody like this, and David, you're going to write something about this. That's sort of how a lot of my tracks, like how if a track started with an idea of mine, it's usually something like that. But yeah, so but we often we try to work by, Jonathan and I'll get a little bit ahead of David. We'll make a bunch of beats, and then he'll come over. He goes upstairs and listens to one and writes to it while we make another one. He records, then we work on that one. So he's like above us, listening to things we've already made while we're making new stuff in the studio, and we try to just like bang out a bunch of things, because it's hard to get all three of us together now. So we try to do like a couple songs in a day, when we can have like 3 or 4 days together in the studio.
And what are the other members' like relationships to experimental music, or like noisy, like straight noise? I mean, I know you mentioned you and Jonathan kind of had some projects together and like were involved, but like how does David? What, I knew you guys were going to each other's shows. Is he like a fan of that stuff?
Jonathan's always liked noise. He's definitely he was like a more beat oriented, like he, in high school, he was like trying to make IDM and sound like Autechre, he's done some noise things, but he's never really done just like straight ahead harsh noise. But he's also done a lot of what would be more like electroacoustic or musique concrète stuff, because he's a really accomplished field recordist, and so he does a lot of he travels a lot to record, and so he'll do. It's definitely more in the realm of like field recording, musique concrète, stuff like that. But he's also, yeah. If you go to his Bandcamp page, he's like super accomplished in that stuff. But
Cool.
but yeah, but I was doing like he was doing like beat stuff and like songwriting, and I was doing like free improv and harsh noise when we were like roommates in college.
Yeah. And how does David fit in that mix?
David would come to shows because, you know, he's a loyal and supportive friend. But no, he dug it. He would always, we talked about it for years before clipping would start. He would be like, oh man, that's so crazy that you and your friends are doing this weird ass shit. Like I could use some of that. Like come do it. So we like made some beats for him before clipping started. Jonathan and I made a couple of like weird, not less weird than clipping, but like still probably weirder than what he was used to, beats for him in the old days. Like 04, 05, 06 kind of days, like when we were like still in college. But yeah, he would come to shows. I mean, David's been to Terminal in Oakland, the Ryan Jenks's place. He's been to. There used to be John Benson had a bus in Oakland and San Francisco, which was like an old AC Transit bus that we would do shows on. You just like find out where it was parked for the night, and there'd be like a harsh noise show inside the bus under like an overpass.
Nice.
He would come to those with me.
Have you ever felt like a need, or not a need, but I mean, clipping's a big band. Like you guys are very big at this point, and like really, I mean, do you ever feel any sort of like not self-consciousness, but like any sort of pressure to tone things down, or pressure to do things in a certain direction, or
No,
any desire to like use that platform to do something, like expose something?
Well, no. I mean, the thing is we're doing okay. I see what you mean, that we're like, we're not a completely unknown band, but we're not big enough that any of us feel any pressure. And we've only gotten where we've gotten by not feeling any pressure except between the three of us, right? We don't know how to write for an audience, and I don't know that if we tried, we would succeed at anything. What we can do, and what we know has worked so far, is that we just make what we want to make and hope it connects with someone else. We talk about like politics in our music, and sometimes that's important to us to have like a sort of a position, a political position behind what we're doing. But we don't. I don't think there's any sort of attempt at. We don't make any sonic choices to get more famous. I think we make the sonic choices because that's what we feel like doing, and that's what we're excited by. Because we've like sometimes we can't even tell. I mean, we didn't expect this to go anywhere, and then at the same time, like sometimes it's the song people like from a record is not the one we thought they would. So we're like, it'll be a super weird one, and we're like, okay, well. We couldn't even predict that. So we can't manufacture that because we couldn't have predicted this.
Right. You guys have a lot of features too with like other, noise artists, experimental artists, but rappers as well. And some really big name rappers in the hip hop world. I mean, Gangsta Boo was on, not an older, but Mid City, I think, or on Clipping.
It was on the second one. Yeah. Also the chat. We got 236 Mafia.
Exactly. And I think the craziest example to me is that the single you guys put out a couple years ago with Benny the Butcher, El Camino, and the Rita. And like Benny the Butcher is, first of all, he's fantastic. He's amazing, but he's like getting really, really big now. I mean, the past couple of years, he's like becoming like, superstar status, and you put him on the track with the Rita. First of all, what's the working process usually like with collaborators? Like, is it like an actual go in the studio kind of thing, or is it kind of like send a verse kind of thing?
Yeah, he sent the verse back, but we did meet. Okay, this is that track is entirely Ted Burns's fault, because Ted and I, for some reason, we were dropping by this studio that El Camino and Benny and DJ Shay, who passed away, who was like making beats for them, were all working. And I think like Ted was like, because Ted had messaged, like he was getting like like some t-shirt, like a rare piece of merch that they had with them. They were like, yo, come by the studio. Yeah. And then we went by the studio, hung out for a little bit, talked with them. And Ted was like, yo, man, ask Benny to get on a song. Wow. And I was like, so what do you think? What do you think about rapping on a song? And he was like, I don't know. I got to hear the beat. Send me a beat. So I went straight over to Jonathan's and we made that beat in like 4 hours specifically for that, and sent it to them, and they were both like, yeah, I like this. This is tight. And so David rapped on it first, so that they could sort of hear what like the vibe of the lyrics were gonna be. And then I think once we had their verses, Ted and I were probably pretty drunk on his porch like a couple months later, and he was like, yo, man, it'd be cool. What if Sam was on that song too? I was like, that's the most insane idea. So that's when I pitched the idea that what if David writes a new verse with new lyrics, and that Sam just destroys it, so you never even hear what the words are. Yeah. And Sam, I was blown away that Sam was willing to do that. And I mean, I've known him I don't know him super well, but I've known him at this point for like 15 years. So like he was very generous with that. And yeah, it was just like, damn, we have like the cultist song. It's like it's got Benny the Butcher and the Rita on it. Is a pretty outrageous. That still makes me laugh. And we're working with noise art. Like we would have done more of that earlier. I think I was a little bit cowardly in the early days to ever ask noise artists to work with me, because I was afraid everyone thought, I was afraid they didn't like rap music. Uh-huh. Right. So eventually ending up getting to work with like Sickness and Pedestrian Deposit and the Rita. That was like finally, it's one thing to ask Death Pile to sample a record or ask White House to sample a record, because they don't have to do anything. Right. That didn't feel that wasn't as scary to me to ask. But it was, but asking people to actually collaborate was scary. And now I'm less nervous about it, but also, Well,
I mean, you're part of that world though, also. I mean,
yeah, they're all people. I mean, Pedestrian Deposit, I've known John Borges for 21 years now. He's been one of my closest friends, and for forever. And Shannon from Pedestrian Deposit, obviously. I introduced them.
Wow, that's cool. That's awesome.
Well, this is a cute story. I can tell it. Yeah. It's not a bad story. No, it's fine. I think it's good. Shannon was like one of my best friends in college. She was getting her MFA in theater scenic design while I was in undergrad, and we would just go to shows together like twice a week. And we would, and Borges and I were friends, and I think he'd already put out a tape by me, and we would do shows together. Sometimes we would hang out all the time, but he started getting me on like every show he would play. It was like 5 in a row. I was like, he would be like, Bill's got to play the show if I'm going to do it. I was like, what is going on? Turns out he was like, if Bill plays, that cute girl I have a crush on will show up to the show and I get to talk to her. And so finally I was like, dude, you don't have to book me on shows. She thinks you're hot. Get her number the next time. Like,
That's great.
yeah.
That's very clever, and that's it's beautiful. I mean, when that happens, when you see that that's the move, you have to take it. So
Well, and now, now they're just this amazing legendary band too.
exactly.
So
Exactly.
I hope they think it's a cute story and that I'm not being a dick for telling this personal story about them.
It's very, very cute. It's more than cute. It's very cool. It's very exciting. Back to back to this track, like with Benny the Butcher, for example.
Oh yeah.
Does he then, or when you work with rappers like him, I mean, I guess, do they then like go back and like, do you ever hear feedback from them? Like they go back and listen to the record? Like, do you ever talk to them about it? Or, I mean, I'm sure they didn't know that Rita was gonna blow the whole end of the song out. I'm sure.
Yeah, we sent it to him and got his approval. I haven't, this was we managed to get in there with him like less than a month before he signed with Rock Nation. So I don't know that it would have played out the same way if he was, managed by, the biggest rap management, whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, I don't know. He retweeted it. He posted it on his Instagram story. So like,
that's super cool. Yeah, that's amazing.
I had zero contact since then. And he gave us a great verse. I mean, he's also one of these dudes that like, he's not gonna phone it in. He's not gonna sound bad on someone else's song. Like,
he hasn't had bad verses. I mean, he's
he's
really one of the best, I think, lyricists of the current moment. I mean, that's super sick song. I mean, it has everything you need on it. It's like a legendary collaboration. Yeah. Do you think clipping has been a gateway for any people into like from rap or from hip hop, I guess, into like harsh noise or more experimental types of music?
I hope so. I've definitely heard people say that. It's hard to tell. I don't, I feel like, you can hold people's hands and bring them in a little bit, but every time I tweet about like a noise record or something that I'm into, it gets like 4 likes. So but so I don't know if anyone's really. I bet there's not like a serious harsh noise purist who got into noise through clipping. I don't think there's someone, releasing tapes on New Forces who only learned about noise through clipping. But I do think
I think there's got to be at least 1 or 2, I think.
Maybe in 10 more years. Maybe like because if we're getting to someone when they're like 8 or 9, that might be how they end up there. But like but yeah, maybe one day. But no, we definitely have. I mean, we have a really diverse So there's a. I guess it's official because we've like gone on it a little bit. It can be official. There's like a clipping fan Discord, and they've like organized multiple compilations of like people who hang out on that, and then released on Bandcamp compilations of their music. And it's not hip hop, like it's all sorts of stuff, right? Yeah. Some of them are fucking noisy as hell. So it's like some people are at least involved. Like it's they're doing really like weird, interesting electronic stuff.
That's cool. I think it's just cool. I mean, I think it's just awesome to bring that into the collective consciousness. I mean, you guys are making super sick hip hop music, and it is hip hop music. It's like it's not like you listen to it and you're like, "What is this?" But like, it has this edge and this element. But it's like I said, I think a lot of times the noise, the term noise, is what kind of puts people into, okay, now this is noise. I have to interpret it like as dark or scary or abrasive. Whereas, but I do like that you guys also rep noise with it. Like you put the Rita on a record, you sample these certain artists. You know, you make sure that that's also part of it. And I think that's really bringing I'm sure it's, even if people aren't becoming diehard fans of it, it's just bringing it into the sort of.
Yeah, I mean, and I want to talk about it all the time. You know, like I want to talk about noise all the time. You know, I mean, I spent 9 years writing for The Wire, trying to write about as much noise as I could. You know,
Yeah,
so
that's right.
like, I do. It's always going to be a thing for me. So I hope some people listen. I hope some people, you know. This is weird because like your audience, right? Your audience are like noise fans. That's not who I'm usually talking to on things like this. Like,
right.
I feel like I got to convince your viewership to that like the E40 is really interesting.
Well, exactly, and I think that's the other thing. I mean, of course, hip hop is, like you said, it's like the biggest global music right now in the world. It's like the biggest pop music in the world, and hip hop culture is like international. American culture gone global, which is awesome.
Yeah.
But I still think there's a lot of people that don't get it or don't follow it or whatever. So I do think that, and I do know for a fact that clipping is for some people like their kind of introduction to like listening to hip hop more seriously.
Yeah, we definitely used to get. Yeah, we used to get. This always like kind of bothered me, but I always got it. Like in the very early days, right? We'd get people at our shows who were like, "Yo, I love you guys. I fucking hate Nicki Minaj. I fucking hate Gucci Mane. I fucking hate Lil Wayne. You guys are the shit." And we're like, no. Like we're not the alternative to that. We like. Right. I like Gucci Mane so much. Like,
yeah.
But like, there's you get this sort of reaction formation of like, the noisy version is for me because the people I didn't like in high school liked Nicki Minaj or something, So it's like, but so I get that, and that's totally valid. That's true. You can absolutely like us that way. I'm happy to, I'm happy that people do, and I'm happy that people that don't like other rap music find something in our music. That's great. But at the same time, I never want to position ourselves as like against anything. Like I want to say that like we're part of rap. Like we're not doing this because we hate rap. We don't make noisy rap because we hate other rappers. We fucking love all rap.
Yeah, exactly. That's important too, because I think you get that too with that. When I was younger, I was also really into kind of the more like underground. I don't know. It wasn't used at the term now. Underground can mean anything now, I guess. But I guess now somebody's just called backpack rap or something like that. But I was into like a lot of like Minneapolis-based stuff where I'm from and stuff like that, like rhyme sayers and stuff like that. And I always, kind of had this attitude, but I heard it more from also other people. Like, yeah, this is real rap. Like, this is the real rap. Like that fake. There's all that fake hip hop going on. This is the real shit. And it's like. And I've totally come around with that. It's like, no, I mean, it's legit too. I mean, it's good. It's real hip hop too, but it's like, this is like mostly like 90% like white people doing their kind of like artistic spin on rap. Cool. But like, I really hate when people try to knock you. You have to realize rap is black music. Rap is from the streets. Rap is what the streets listen to, whatever the streets are on, that is what is the truth. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
and it I think it's changed a lot. I think that is an attitude that was like my high school too. That was like my high school years growing up in the Bay. It was like there was the serious artistic rap, which there was so much. They had such a chip on their shoulder about what was and wasn't popular, I mean, it's not. I love this album, but the sort of history of it is like "Stakes is High" by De La Soul, right? Which was such like a flag pointed in the ground, and it's like there's a line drawn. It's like you're on this side or this side. You are gangster, or you are intelligent, lyrical, whatever, which was just nonsense. And like, I think it was helpful for me growing up where I did, because it was such a small regional scene that we had Hieroglyphics, Living Legends,
Yep.
Hobo Junction, Quantum Projects, Soul Sides, whatever. So we had all these like, we had the lyrical backpack or whatever stuff, and it was fucking brilliant.
Yeah.
And it was, they were all on top of each other. We also had E40 and Too Short and Keek the Sneak and Ant Banks and Richie Rich. And it was such a small regional scene. It felt so stupid to make these distinctions because it's like, and so I always thought instead of the us versus them for me growing up was not like Gangster versus Backpack or whatever. It was the Bay versus the stranglehold New York and LA have on the rap scene. So it was like I loved the Bay. I loved being from the Bay. I loved the like that regionalness to the music, and you know, like that we had songs that everyone in the Bay knew. But if you step 2 feet out of it, no one had ever heard of it.
Right.
But everyone, like, you know, just like 10-year-old white kids know all the words to a Mac Dre song, but you go to LA and no one even knows who Mac Dre is.
Right.
And so I loved that. And I definitely like, we felt this, I think the Bay always like, there was this kinship, you know, I got really, really into Southern rap as well, because, you know, before Outkast really, the South felt like the same thing. It was these sort of like these other markets that didn't have a national presence.
Yeah.
And so instead, the backpack, the conscious versus gangster divide to me was like, no, we're in this together. The enemy are these two cities. Even though I adore rap from New York and LA, and I always listen to it as well. That was the sense of like, no, there's this regional pride. Don't worry about, you know, whether they're talking about, you know, spirituality or guns, you know.
Right. Yeah, for sure. That's interesting. And I think those regionalities, well, things have blown apart in terms of regionality in hip hop in many ways. I mean,
Totally.
Everyone wants to sound like the South. I mean, everyone kind of sounds the same in some way, but I still think
everyone sounds like the internet now.
Exactly,
you know?
exactly. Everyone sounds like the internet, but I still think the Bay Area is still a sound that hasn't. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like they have. I'm not a professional on this, but I feel like the Detroit sound that's really big right now is very, very much Bay Area influence. Is that accurate?
Oh yeah, I mean, the Detroit and the Bay have had like a really strong connection. I think, like my cat's on my lap.
That's cool. Sweet.
I think that really that connection was really strong, you know, starting like 10 years ago. And I think that like the flow of all these new rappers in the Bay, the sort of the SOB RBE, like slightly ahead of the beat, like very staccato style that everyone's doing, really came from like rappers from Detroit showing up in the Bay, rappers in the Bay going to Detroit. You know, I'm very outside of all this. I don't know, like,
right.
But you just see them on the records. Like the thing about, I make rap music in clipping, but every other rap music I talk about, I am so outside. I'm just a fan, right? Like I don't actually, you know, have the insider info on all of this, but you know, there was, you would just sort of see, you know, who's featured on what. You know, clearly these people were in the Bay for a couple weeks and ended up on this, you know, all black record and this SOB record and this fucking Shooter Gang record, you know, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like, I think the internet has squashed everything. I mean, noise used to be super regional, right?
Totally.
Like I think a lot of noise, like you can sound like anywhere, but when I was growing up, it was really distinct.
Absolutely.
You know, like noise from Italy sounded like one thing, right? Noise from Japan sounded like this other thing.
Yeah. Noise from the Midwest sounded like one thing.
Midwest, the whole like Mother Savage Midwest thing was like, that was a really like specific sound. I mean,
Los
LA
Angeles sound.
Yeah, I mean, in LA, I feel like LA was like, I've got a lot of feelings about what LA was then like known for or thought about, or like where that actually came from, for like actually being in it for so long.
Yeah.
It was weird to see, the early days of, I was on the, I don't know how much younger than me you are. Were you, how active were you on like I Heart Noise and
I was very active. Well, I wasn't posting on there much, but I was like on there all day, like sitting. I was sitting on it like all the time. So I was there. I think the year I got really like fanatically involved was like 2006, 2007.
Okay. Yeah. Right on.
So yeah, I mean,
so that was like, it was just interesting to see what people thought the West Coast sounded like from on the forum versus like being in it, and like who they thought were the innovators and who they thought were the greats. Was just like it was fascinating. No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. I don't know. I have a sort of a chip on my shoulder about John Borges would play a show, and he was so meticulous that what the material he was presenting wouldn't be on a tape for another like 8 months.
Yeah.
But everyone who was at that show would rip him off and get the tape out first. And I was just like, everyone was like, oh, there's this whole scene of people doing these things and all these innovators. And I was like, no, there's a guy, and everyone steals from him. And so we all kind of sound like, I mean, I don't think anyone did it maliciously or even intentionally, but I would just hear like, I was just like, oh, we all just look at him. We were all just like watching what he was doing. I mean,
interesting.
And obviously, I mean, they were really great. I think what has survived from that scene, at least from that, like, I'm talking like this small group. I mean, there was so much stuff in LA, but this small group of like LA pedal noise, pure harsh thing that became like, oh, this is this West Coast sound.
Yeah.
I think what has like lasted, I think because the stuff people like still talk about are the actual masterpieces. I think we have gotten it right. Like Dreams What Dreams We Can Afford, right? The X Jesus, do you know this one? Yeah. Or Sex Jesus or X Jesus. I don't remember which name he used for that one. It was on Callow God. It's like someone was reissuing that, but like I feel like that is one of the masterpieces. They that the history has borne that out. That one was the one. I think a lot of other stuff doesn't sound as unique anymore as it did to us then, but like, man, that was. But it was it was a crazy.
Were you aware of that dynamic at the time? Were you kind of critical of that time when you were watching it, or was that kind of like after?
No, yeah, I absolutely was. I absolutely was. I mean, because this was my friend group at the time, so it's like I knew the interpersonal dynamics between everyone, and like it's definitely different. Because like I would look at other scenes, like, and you don't know, like, you just know the names on tapes and what they sound like, and you sort of imagine, but like these are actually like the people you spend all day, every day with. Then there's a lot more sort of. It's just it all feels so much stickier, like when you actually know. And I just saw this happen. I mean, and there obviously something like Cherry Point is totally outside of that, right? Like that's not, he was a little bit older, but also like ran the label and was like. He was who we all looked up to, and then there were the slightly older, even like Damian Romero, right, who was like, above all this. But like when you're 24 and there's like 10 of you all punching pedals on tables together, it was I mean, I everyone loved each other. We all still, I mean, I'm not close with a lot of those people anymore, but I still have a lot of affection for them. But oh shit, I gotta turn off my Roomba before it ruins the sound.
It's all good.
It's gotta vacuum up all the cat hair. Anyway, I feel like I'm rambling, and I feel like I'm just
no. That's fast. That's super fascinating. Super fascinating.
Airing weird old grievances about.
Well, that's fascinating. I mean, that's really fascinating because of course I'm very aware of that sound, and of course I'm very aware of that John Borges is a big part of it, but I never really kind of followed that, and I also kind of feel like a lot of the LA, well, not some of the LA crew, or a lot of the kind of mid 2000s crew, a lot of those guys seem to me to be very also nomadic, where they were maybe living in LA for a time and like moving around quite a bit, and then maybe taking that sound with them. And
yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, a lot of people who were like associated with that, who were like there at the time, ended up drifting away. The issue was there were only like, God, what, maybe 3 or 4 years of Il Corral existing, right? And that was the venue. That was why any of this coalesced into a scene, into anything, right? So,
Sure.
So Bob Belleroux opened Il Corral, I want to say like 05, maybe 04, maybe end of 04. I'm trying to think. The first show was I think it was the first show they did, but I was the first show I went to, was like a secret after party for Wolf Eyes, and where Wolf Eyes played when they were like on where they were on tour, maybe opening for Sonic Youth or something. Mm-hmm. So it was like the first time I saw them, and it was the first time I'd ever been to this like that space, and it was like at midnight, and it was so fucking loud, and there were so many people, and I didn't really know anyone yet, and then it was like I was there every show, but there was that. But yeah, so like, I mean, there are some people. There were like people who were from LA, like like Jeff and his brother with the Witchers,
right.
And then there was Matt Sullivan, Privy
Right.
Seal,
Yeah.
etc. And then the Haircut Mountain Transit guys, Kyle and Alex. They had their little scene. I don't know. I don't think they ever released anything under this name, but they were called Men Who Can't Love.
Oh yeah, I know the name. I
Yeah.
remember seeing like a really low res YouTube video back in the day, and being like, "Fuck."
Yeah, I mean they would like travel together as like one thing because they'd each play for like 2 minutes, so they could all fit in the size of like the time length of one band. Those were the days.
Why do you think? I mean,
And Toxic Loincloth. Sorry, he's still around. He's a fucking genius, and no one outside of LA knows him. Toxic Loincloth. He's what he used to be called. His name is Cole. He's got a new name now. I don't know, but he's like he's the low key secret weapon in LA. Like no one outside.
I know the name, but I have no idea.
Cole Miller. Yeah.
It's kind of one of those names. I mean, that just until you see him play live, maybe you're not always clamoring to.
Yeah.
Find out who
No.
that is.
Yeah. And you wouldn't know. There was one. There's one tape, and it's an absolute masterpiece, and I wish someone would reissue it. I think it's a C5. It was called Nasal Nails and Intestinal Teeth.
Uh-huh.
And it's just like he was always the wild card because he was like circuit bending toys into harsh noise.
Cool.
Anyway.
So I mean, all scenes and moments kind of ebb and flow, and that's natural. That's how it goes. Is there any sort of reason that you can think of or identify that kind of that bubble of mid 2000s intensity around noise dissipated?
I mean, I think there was Il Corral closing, right? Not Il Corral closing. I guess it didn't quite close. Bob moved away, right? So then it wasn't the same scene. You know, everyone had sort of drifted into, again, sort of following the lead of John Borges, everyone started doing like ambient projects.
Right. That's
Right.
very true. I mean, that's very true. I know it was it was sort of a controversial moment when Pedestrian Deposit, well, when Shannon joined Pedestrian Deposit, and
Yeah.
you know,
But it was,
we
but
were all
even
fans of
before
it. It was great. It was great, but it was like we were all. I mean, I was young and I was kind of a meathead, and I was a fan of this, crushing stuff. And then, I remember seeing them play with as a duo the first time, and it was not that at all. And I think everyone was a little like, what's? I mean, but then that was what everyone was doing then for a while.
This is before that. Like before Shannon was even in Pedestrian Deposit, he was doing like these sort of like pretty ambient loop tapes and things, and then
There was
Jeff
Emaciator as well.
Yeah, Emaciator was like, it got sort of pretty sometimes, but like Emaciator was more like sort of that crumbling old school. Like it was supposed to sound like something on like Come Org, it was like old Ramla or something like that. Right. And it was still like grimy, but things just got like prettier and prettier. Like Jeff started doing Marble Sky. Gordon Oscillating Innards did a bunch of really beautiful ambient projects.
Yep.
I mean, it was really it was true to all these guys. I mean, Borges and Gordon especially were like huge ambient fans the whole time. They'd always wanted to do that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
That was always like what they listened to. It wasn't like, I don't think it was far from cynical to make these choices. They just started growing and expanding and doing other things. And I remember it was on the board, everyone was like, on the iHeart Noise board, it was like, oh, what the fuck? All of the toughest, loudest dudes in LA just got so soft and pretty and melodic.
Right. And then where did it go from there?
I think it just like fractured. I mean, it didn't, maybe I'm just too old. Maybe I'm grown out of it, but it didn't feel, after that, it never felt like there were that many people invested in this scene where you felt like this is the center of the world in our little world, right? There were others, like, there was another generation a couple of years behind us. It was like Wrong Hole, Sisters, Concrete Shiva, Kevin, what was Heavy Psych? What was his project called? Droughter.
Yeah.
They were all like vaguely around Long Beach. Am I right? Is it Droughter? Is that someone else? I
know of Droughter. I don't remember if they're from LA, but I could be.
Kevin McElhenney. Anyway, but yeah, so they were from like Long Beach, and they were all a little bit younger than us. And after it sort of felt like, things had sort of dissipated, then they showed up and things were more exciting for a little bit. But like a lot of the original people that I came up with had moved away. Yeah. And I was in grad school by then, so like I wasn't like, I couldn't pay that close of attention. I was still playing shows all the time. But but there's always been this also history of, LA always had, John Weiss was always there, but he always was a little bit distanced from that because he was very established. Right. He had the sort of art gallery cred. He was like, I always sort of thought he was like a little bit fancier than us. Like he wasn't like a total scumbag like us. He was like, oh, that's John. Yeah. He tours Europe and gets grants. He's good at this. We're all garbage. Right. And then, there was always that, and the LAFMS scene. So there was always that sort of weirdo, that sort of weirdo psychedelic angle in LA too. But I think there's like a base level of what LA noise feels like, because there's always going to be the sort of stalwarts. There's always going to be, a handful of people around. And then there are sort of flare-ups of excitement around harsh noise, definitely.
Yeah. And I mean, that time, those years were so rich and so diverse also, and regional, like you also said. What do you think people were like? What do you think people were listening for at that time? What do you think were the fertile grounds that made that time so magical?
I mean,
Like what?
having
How
a
did
venue,
how did you
having a
get into
venue
it?
to do it in, having a venue to do it in with that had connections to like people coming through all the time, right? Like, so people were touring back then too.
Yeah.
So like Il Corral was really great because you had like the sort of house bands, right? You had like the people who were gonna play, but it was someone would come through. You'd see like Sickness or the Rita would come through, or Sword Heaven, and then you'd have, Circuit Wound would always be playing or something like that, or like these other people who were just, so you had like this built-in crew, and then it was also a time where like all these people from around the country would actually show up, which I don't know if that happens as much anymore. But it was like every week you'd be like, and Venomist is playing or something, like people from far away, Hive Mind would show up,
Totally. Well, let's talk about your involvement in it then. Like, how did you first get introduced to noise in this world? And how did that lead to you starting? And was RALE your first project of this sort?
Yeah, definitely like in noise. I think I have like one recording out before that that's like electroacoustic improvisation, but that's like another sort of thing I do. I definitely got into all of this. I don't know. I mean, I had a job from like 8th grade until graduating high school. I worked at a video store. I worked at like the cool video store in my town. And so I had this, even though I was getting paid fucking pennies, I had enough disposable income that all I spent it on was records. And I think, going deeper and deeper into anything like this is like, it was like a process of, it's like accidentally stumbling across something that completely like fries your brain.
Yeah.
Which I think like maybe when I was like 13, I bought Interstellar Space by John Coltrane, thinking it was going to sound like Giant Steps or Blue Train. Mm-hmm. And then it was just so out. And I was like, this is fraudulent. This is bullshit. This is not music. But like, I was a kid and I had all the time in the world. So I just like kept listening until I liked it, and then it was just like chasing that. So I definitely like got into noise through like free jazz and then into like free improvisation, right? Like learning about like discovering Derek Bailey through his record with Anthony Braxton. Mm-hmm. And then, trying to find more things that Derek Bailey is on, that Evan Parker was on, that, all these type of players were on, would lead me out of the jazz section at Amoeba into the section that was just called Unusually Experimental at Amoeba Records.
Yeah.
And then just going through those, I mean, I would just go straight to Unusually Experimental, grab whatever looked cool, and that means I would accidentally come home with like straight up harsh noise. Like, Merzbow had a record on John Zorn's label Zadok, and therefore, like, I thought maybe it was going to be free jazz or something, or improv, because it was on Zorn's label, and it wasn't. And I was like, fuck yeah, what is this?
Yeah.
More Merzbow, please.
Yeah.
So that as a fan, it was just like this evolution of things that my first response was, well, this is bullshit. This isn't even music.
Right.
And then being like, nope, that's what I want. And then the next thing, I got to find the next one. And at some point you sort of stall out on like things that can really like break your brain open like that. But then, I moved to LA for college. I started going every week to. It started at the Smell, and I think it was like Improv Wednesdays or something. There was like an improvised music series on Wednesdays, and then it eventually moved to the Salvation Theater and got the name Line Space Line, and it was where all the electroacoustic and improvised music was happening. And there wasn't a lot of crossover with like noise. Like I didn't really know that much noise was happening in LA at that point. This is like 02, 03. I remember meeting John Weiss at Line Space Line where he performed. But there wasn't like this scene of young kids doing it yet that I knew about. So it was more like, like people playing with like, a guitar laid flat across their lap with a bunch of springs and balls on it.
Sure.
That kind of shit.
Yeah.
And so I was playing like that. I had like a musical saw that I didn't play like a musical saw. I just used it as an amplified metal surface. And so I played some shows there with other people, with the three people who ran it when I was actually got to. They weren't necessarily the founders, but they were the people who were there running it when I started playing. Were Jessica Catron, who's a cellist, Jeremy Drake, who's a guitar player, and David Rothbaum, who is also then later recorded as Monstero. Had releases on like Hanson and a bunch of other things.
I think I recognize him, yeah.
Yeah, and he was playing clarinet at the time. So I would play with them a bunch. And then that kind of closed down. That series ended. I think the overlap might have been like maybe a month between that first Il Corral show and Line Space Line ending. And so I just started going to Il Corral and was like, oh, well, I want to be a part of this. No one wants to hear my like quiet, scratchy sounds on this piece of metal. So, or I just didn't, I was like, I'm not going to do that here. So I was like, well, I've got to figure out what I can do to hang out here, And I'd loved noise for years. I was into it, but I wasn't like around it in the same way. Like I remember I met Damian Romero at Il Corral one of the first times. And I had to confess to him, I was like, you're a Speculum Fight, but you're not Japanese. Because I just saw his name on all these records with like MSBR and and people like that, I didn't realize he wasn't also a Japanese guy. Right. He's just a guy from LA. Yeah. And I was like, oh shit, wait, Speculum Fight isn't Japanese noise. It was here somehow. He was just going over there all the time in the 90s. Yeah. So I just didn't know that there was anything until then.
Sure. And then did RALE develop as like right away? Did you jump into that kind of intensity with it?
No, not really. I don't think so. Like Jonathan Snipes, I convinced him, my roommate at the time from clipping, I convinced him to do a noise project with me because I think I was like I didn't want to do something alone necessarily because I didn't really like know people well enough and I wasn't sure that I actually knew what I was doing. I totally didn't yet. So we did a couple of shows under the name Unnecessary Surgery. Which were just silly, but there was like more like just harsh noise. Yeah. But like, I don't think we were very good. Like, I think we were like, now that I'm not, I don't intend to ever look back or listen to any of those recordings. But RALE, RALE started because I didn't want to. I wanted to just make like pedal harsh noise, but like I was intimidated in that I thought everyone was going to be like, everyone was so good. They were really established, you know, like John, Circuit Wound, fucking Impregnable, Privy Seals. They were all like good already. So I was like, okay, I'm going to try and do something. I'm going to make this sort of hybrid thing and slow everything down. Because I also was not like, I'm also not like as a performer, I didn't want to be the thrash around, scream back into the audience, like get knocked over, tip my table over person. I felt like that would feel forced coming from me. It would feel like I was definitely like I think a little more reserved. Yeah. So I thought like my answer to that was going to be this absolutely just glacial version of it, just like as slow as possible, where it's like I would set up my synth and I would set a timer and I had 8 minutes to turn this one knob from here to here. And that was the set, you know? Yeah. Like, so I started doing that because I thought that was sort of more my personality, but I thought like that would carve out my little place in that scene. That's what I was trying to do. Yeah. And I think I always felt like I was never really, I was a little bit outside, even though these were like my best friends, because I wasn't like getting to be on all the labels necessarily. Like they weren't putting out my stuff. I think I felt I was kept at a bit of a distance because also I was like in graduate school, you know. Sure. No one knew exactly what what I was up to. Sure. They weren't sure if I was a lifer or not, you know.
Well, you clearly are, but I mean, it's also cool that you, I think, in such a scene, decided to do something, you know, kind of unclassifiable and on your own path, instead of just trying to just be in, you know, another one of the guys doing the same, you know, similar thing, follow them.
I think that comes from like my interest in improv, I think, in free improv, because like in those days of free improv, like it was all about like your specific language that was yours. Like this is the collection of sounds you can make and you bring with your instrument, and everyone wanted to figure out how to get a whole world of sounds out of playing an instrument wrong. Right? Like, so that was really influential to me, was like, you want to be able to tell who someone is, that they bring a particular voice to this thing, right? You think of, you know, Axel Derner, trumpet player, who would not, you know, he invented a whole language for trumpet without playing not playing true notes, right? It just sounded like air and valves and spit. You know, so there's this attempt to like crack open an instrument and make that that is your voice through that is your, and there's a lot of emphasis put on invention, right? Like you have to discover this, like you have to bring something completely new. Right. And I still think like that. I mean, with the you know, I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's like that really does push me to be like, the person who figured out how to do this thing is really important to me. Because that's so much what I admired. And like Toshimaru Nakamura and Sachiko M, right? Toshimaru Nakamura making a whole universe of sound that he's committed himself to for the last 25 years with just mixer feedback. And he has never repatched his mixer. Right. Since like 1998, it has stayed exactly plugged in the exact same way. And he's made hundreds of albums that all sound different with just the mixing board, and then Sachiko M just playing sine waves, right? It was all about like, what is the thing no one's ever heard before that can be your voice. Right. So that's sort of probably why, except like, you know, couched in very conceptual terms, I will do like a regular harsh noise thing. But like I've always like, the thing that's going to be my main project always has to be something that I think I'm doing that no one else is doing, right? Yeah. So RALE RALE, after it became like when it was like really just cold, windy droning and crackling, that started feeling like it wasn't as unique as I wanted it to be. And that's when RALE turned exclusively into, okay, the same types of sounds, but a performance would be starting at silence, swelling up into that sound, fading out to silence again, sitting there in silence, swelling up another sound, so that it was these like individual events in long silences. That's sort of what RALE was for the last, like, I mean, I guess I could still do it. I never like officially stopped doing it, but that's sort of what it became after that. So I was never really doing I was never really going to do the same thing as other people. But then also, that's sort of disingenuous because, of course, I did, right? I would also, it was very well known as a side project and very conceptual, but I would also play as ANTHRACITE, which was just straight worship imitation of, like, 90s pedal stuff.
Sure.
But that was always like it was always a side project, and
like
it was
with
always
rules, like you described earlier, kind of with clipping, like the side project.
Yeah, it had rules. I mean, it was all each piece was themed after a labor uprising from the end of the 19th century, like between between Reconstruction and World War II, different labor uprisings would be the theme of them, and that would be the artwork on the tape. I only did like 3 tapes maybe, but I would play live, and I would play like old Union songs under noise and stuff.
Cool. With RALE, how like when you describe that performance process or kind of structure, how long were these pieces and how long were the silences, and how was the reaction to that? Because that's difficult to do. I mean, that's.
I think everyone knew what they were getting into with me. So like, if you weren't down, you knew to go outside, have a smoke during my set. The pieces would not be long. I would play there would be maybe 9 sounds in 10 minutes.
Okay.
Right. And the silences could be, they probably wouldn't be longer than 10, 15 seconds at a time. But I would really just try my hardest to just focus and sit there and not, at like there's this discipline, right? Just focus on doing as little as possible, because like when people are actually there watching you, it's really hard not to want to do something.
Right. It is. That's very true.
Which is something I actually wrote about in like 2008. I wrote like a sort of half like academic-ish article. It wasn't actually like peer reviewed. It wasn't in a real journal, but it was like an academic style journal. I wrote about the Rita and use in its relationship to like uses of silence in like contemporary concert music, specifically like the Vondelweiser composers, Radu Malfatti and Michael Pissarro and people like that, as like this sort of disciplined inactivity, but the sort of innovation being that a lack of that, like you can sit that Sam is doing something similar in his inactivity, but because it's electronics, he can have his hands off, and there is a disciplined waiting patience to this full-on barrage assault of sound, right? If you're an acoustic musician, doing nothing is silence, but if you're an electronic musician, doing nothing can be the loudest thing ever.
Yeah.
So I remember talking to Sam in those early days about this and having this conversation about sort of inactivity and discipline and focus and like forcing yourself not to do too much, and that like was part of what I was trying to go for, what I was trying to experiment with just with myself and my own sort of fussy restlessness.
Cool. That's really, I think it's an important concept for a lot of reasons, and creation, but also in performance, just strategy. But it's yeah, it's very interesting. What was there thematic content to RALE as well beyond the sonics?
Not really, not in the same way. There was just a loose thematic there. So I made a rule so that I wouldn't have to worry about it and think about thematic content, was that every title for a RALE thing was just a particularly evocative sentence from whatever book I was reading at that time. Mm-hmm. So that was, but there wasn't much connection outside of that. And I don't think those, any of those titles, they were so after the fact. They were long after the recording was done. So there's not really any. I have a hard time remembering which ones sound like what, because the titles don't actually have any association with the song, with the sonics to me. Okay. But so yeah, there wasn't really a. I mean, so RALE. The word RALE is when you have like pneumonia. A crepitant RALE is a crackly breath. Right. Yeah. So I was really focused on like texture and specifically like slowly evolving crackling.
Yeah.
And it had, at least in my mind, I've never actually said this out loud to anyone. In my mind, there was this sort of connection to like body and failure. Right. So it's like this is an illness, people. Another word like a death rail, right? The death, that's your last breath, right? The death rattle. So I think there was this like the discomfort of the slowness, right? And the minimal and how minimal it was, right? The physical discomfort of like crumpling yourself on the floor and trying to turn a knob as slowly as possible for 10 minutes. But, and also like the physical failure of that, of like hands on knobs, not actually doing it perfectly. Right. And then just the physicality and the sort of biological timbre to the crackling I wanted to achieve was always supposed to have this sort of almost like trying to imitate like a crackle that could exist in nature, right? Like either something physical rubbing or a strained like phlegmy breath.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that, because I've never consciously identified this, but when I think of RALE and the sounds and kind of the word, I didn't know that was the definition of the word, but the sounds and that word, what it kind of evokes, I think of lungs. So that's
exactly it is. Yeah,
that's interesting. Yeah. That's very interesting. So what about tattered syntax?
Tattered syntax was. So I said, I started doing RALE because I didn't think I was good enough to play with the people that I wanted to play with. So I found
a thing. You made tattered syntax and you realized, oh, I am.
No. I did that in secret over many, many years. So I was putting those together. Each one of those tracks is like months and months and months and months of editing, because I didn't really know what I was doing. But I wanted to sound like sickness. I wanted to sound like John Borges. Yeah. And I was trying to teach myself how to do it, but I could only do it in editing. I could never do it live.
Sure.
So those were these pieces that I would just make. I was making them to fit on. Remember those business card CDRs? I was making them to fit on business card CDRs, and I had this idea that I would like. Once one was good, that's how, because I thought it's kind of a pain in the ass to give someone too big of a demo. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna give Phil Blankenship and John Weiss and Damian Romero these business card CDRs to show them that I can make like a super brutal, fast, cut up digital noise album.
Yeah.
And I never had the courage. I never fucking did it. I didn't ever give them to anyone. Those were like 10 years in the making, and I just made one after another. And I think only John Borges had ever heard them. Like I played them for him, and he was always like, "It's good." He's very sparing with his praise, but when he says it's good, I was like, okay, thank God. Oh shit.
Yeah.
But I was like, I'd forgotten there was no like fire under me to do it because I also couldn't do them live. Like there was no hope of I had no idea how I would ever do them live. So I was just cutting up things into the tiniest little pieces and arranging them painstakingly over years. And I ended up with a handful of them, and then Luke Skeleton Dust asked me, I don't even know how. I think maybe John Borges told him to ask me. He was like, Bill's doing this thing, you should check these out.
Yeah. So
I gave him like 4 of them or 3 of them for one tape. What's crazy is there is actually a live track on the Tattered Syntax album. There's a live at Il Corral, but it's the only one that's not cut up.
Yeah.
That was an actual live performance, but I didn't do that under the name Tattered Syntax. I actually did it under the name. I think I probably did it under Anthracite. And
when
then
you performed it,
when I performed, I think I was billed as Anthracite, but I like did that and then liked the recording and wanted it to go on that, so I called it Tattered Syntax. But
cool.
That's so there is one live. Yeah, I think I was so yeah. That's how insecure I was that I needed to include a live track on Tattered Syntax because I was like, no, I can do it live. It's not too hard. I can do it. There is one live track on that. So that just like once Luke put it out, then Matt Purse asked me if there was any more, and I just had the rest of them. And that was just what I had made up until that point, and it happened to fit on a CD. And then I added like a couple of little interlude things in it because I had some there are like interludes on there which are just the sound of audio interfaces failing.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so
that's
there's one
available from. Is he sold out of that one? I think it came
no
out
idea.
2015. I think that's definitely worth it. If it's not out there, it's definitely worth reissuing it because I've heard the tape on Skeleton Dust, and I've heard about this CD and that it's super great, and I haven't had a chance to hear it, and I don't think it's available from the label anymore. And it's like,
oh really?
I know people. I know people talk about it very, very, very highly. A friend of mine who is a big fan of your stuff, who lives here in Cologne, was like, when I told him I was interviewing him, he was like super stoked. And he's like, ask him how he made Tattered Syntax.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't see it on his website. I mean the Skeleton Dust one is half of the material, so right. It sounds
right.
bad. I think that's like I don't remember which tracks are where, but that's probably.
But it has a very unique clinical and precision, and it's very digital. I think a lot of times certain noise is much more suited for CD than tape, and this is definitely one of those. So it's great that the CD exists.
Yeah, that project was. It has a very different character. Like Anthracite, wants to sound like Skin Crime. This really wanted to sound like CD era Sickness. Yeah. And CD era, like the first 3 Pedestrian Deposit albums without the ambient stuff, without any of the ambient like stuff, just the full on Assault stuff.
That's cool. What were some of your other techniques that went in making the source? Because I think, in some ways, I'm always a little bit surprised that so many harsh noise artists do shy away from using a lot of digital editing, like DAW editing. And of course, there's a lot that do, but that's still, for some people, a very like foreign realm. And but that stuff has a very still unique sound. I mean, there's a lot of people that do cut up noise on, but But what gives it that special sound?
I have never told anyone this. I have never told anyone how I made that. What I did was I would record long chunks of just pedal noise and line up 2 takes, hard pan them, then open them in this program called Peak. And I would record the audio output from Peak while I clicked the cursor around in the track. And every time you moved the cursor while it was playing, it would leave a little bit of a silence. So then I would take the performance of that, of clicking around, and it would be like sound, silence, sound, silence, sound, silence. I would go through and I would painstakingly cut out every silence, squish them all back together, then use that again and do it again.
Wow.
So then I would click around in that and do it again until the pieces were so small.
Wow.
That I ended up with these very, very quick. And then I would go from stereo to mono, and so it would be like wide, narrow, and then maybe I'd get stuck on a sound, and there'd be like this little digital sound, and some of those were like just computer noise stuff. I'd make something in Max MSP, or I also had a modular synth at the same time, so I would like make that and then process it digitally. But that process of just literally like hijacking the audio out of the program, pushing play on noise I'd already made, and then just clicking the mouse around in it for the cuts. Is
like
how
across
I
the
did
timeline.
Yeah, just across, have the whole thing open and just go click, 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 click for like 40 minutes. Just click, 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 click until I had like a long ass track of that would look like, because every time the playhead would catch up to where you clicked, it would leave a tiny silence.
Right.
So then I would have to go through and manually slice out all the silences because I didn't know then, because I wasn't good enough. Like now I would know how to get rid of the silence. Like now I would know how to find all the silences and cut them out in a batch processing. But like then I was like, really, but also because like doing it at that like such a microscopic level, I would listen to things back and over and over and over and over and over, and I'd be like, okay, this slice is in the wrong place, and I would cut stuff and I would like move it around.
Yeah.
So it was like really, really. I mean, that's why I would, these tracks would take months and months and months and months of not like consistent work, but like a couple hours a week. I just fuck around with them, and like, I would have worked at such a micro level in those tracks that like every single sound had been considered, and everything that's in there, I was like, yes, that is right. I'm leaving that in.
That's really cool, actually. That's a really cool process, because it's like, it's starting with live noise. It's then like kind of rolling the dice with it. I'd see. I mean, when you were clicking around, you were kind of just
I had
doing.
no idea what it was going to be, right? Because
then-
it just looked like a giant, like it was all maxed out. It was brick walled,
Right.
so I don't
Yeah.
even know where in the track I'm clicking.
Yeah, and then using that process and getting to like a very composed, refined, short piece in the end. It's kind of like going from beginning to. It's like kind of like, starting with an organic process, going random, and then, or starting with like a played musical type playing.
Yeah.
Going like random with it, and then using that as the final building blocks for a composition. That's really cool.
Yeah. I haven't thought about that in so long, and I've definitely. I think at the time I was embarrassed because I thought there had to be some better way. I was basically trying to reverse engineer what I heard, in cut up noise, but I didn't know how anyone else did it, and I was too afraid to ask. So I was like trying to reverse engineer how you might sound like a fail association or TEF or something. I was like, I wanted to sound like.
I bet that your process isn't. I bet people have gone similar processes before, because I know that sometimes when I'm doing, I've never done like hard cut noise stuff like that, but I know that sometimes when I work on stuff and get to some crazy perfect combination of sounds. It's just because I randomly dropped two sound files on top of each other and they lined up in that way, and I was like, oh, this is how it's supposed to be, and those those happy accidents and things are really super important, and I'm sure that's even a lot of the most meticulous stuff that you hear that sounds like every little piece was.
But yeah, but then you'd see like because I was close to the Bay, so I would see like Zohm and Stimbox play, and I was like, they're doing it somehow with buttons on the table.
Yeah,
I'm not doing that. I couldn't know how to do that. So
I know
like,
what you mean, though. I know
yeah. So that's part of why it was so painstaking, was because I just didn't, that was my solution, was to click around and peek.
That's killer. I think it's very cool. I would hope that can get a repress, Matt. If you're listening, we need a repress of that CD. I know people want it. I know I want it. I've wanted it for a while.
I didn't. I almost. This is the most I've ever talked about it. No one's ever even mentioned it to me. So except with Matt when we were making it.
Sure. So I had a question written down. Why so little of the material? And I guess that's sort of is the answer.
Oh,
but
it's exhausting.
Do you have any plans to? Have you worked on it since, or any plans? So anything like that?
There are a couple like half tracks on the hard drive that, God, I mean, that's, I would like to make, I have an idea for how another Tattered Syntax album would work. I would need some sort of something to motivate me, some feeling like I needed a deadline and someone actually wanted it. Sure. And I could possibly do it. But at this point, it's like, I can't finish the records people have asked for that I said I would do, like sure. There are labels I've owed things to for embarrassingly long.
Yeah. That's great though. That's good to know that you're still active with that stuff, even if sparingly. I mean, I'm sure clipping takes up a crazy amount of time.
I mean, I've got not really. It's in like bursts. I've got plenty of time, in between things. I did just do, So I also play. I made this sort of like instrument I can improvise with, and I just did a release on Super Pang last month.
Under your name?
Under William Hutson, yeah.
Okay, cool.
Which is just like this, and I played my first shows in 3 years, just recently.
Nice.
Which were pretty fun. What's that dude from? Both of them were with a guy from Poland, David.
David Kowalski. Oh yeah, that's right. I saw that you played it. Yeah, Purgist.
Yeah. Sorry, I couldn't remember. I was like, it starts with a P. What the hell? Yeah. Purgist. Yeah. So those were like doing the tape music stuff. Purgist. Nice. He's so good. He's super fucking good. Ruled.
Yeah.
Yeah. No. Right. So it's like
show that Oxen related show that I guess Matt put on. I'm guessing. Yeah. When Purgist toured. Yeah, that's not long ago.
So so that's sort of what the non-clipping music stuff that has been more active recently is, and it's still not active at all. It's like 2 releases in 5 years, but sure. And Ted Burns and I do a duo with that stuff where I play tape music, where I play this tape player with a loop. And he plays drums, obviously.
Yeah. Does that have a name? I've heard about that, but I didn't.
It's just Ted Burns, William Hutson.
Have you released anything on it with it yet? I know
there's 1 or 2 things on Bandcamp, and then we did one for his record that's all duos.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the one I've heard. Yeah. But that's an ongoing thing.
Yeah, we try to. Well, we have plans. It's been a while, but we need to get better at it. We hang out all the time and then don't play together.
Sure.
But we should.
Cool. That's something to look forward to for sure. And I meant to ask you this at the beginning. I don't think I did, but what are you up to like right now? Or you guys are going on tour with Clipping very soon, right?
Yeah. In 1 week from this recording, so maybe by the time it's out, we might already be there. I don't know. We're gonna play in Europe. We'll be gone. Basically, I'm gone from like the 9th until December 6th, I think.
Nice.
A lot of shows. I don't even know where. They're all on the Instagram probably or somewhere.
I saw that there's no Germany shows, which is a bummer.
It's really confusing to me as well, especially because when we canceled 60 shows at the beginning of COVID, like a bunch of those were German shows, and then I just don't know. I like our booking agent said something about like shows getting canceled in Germany, that there was some reason, but I don't know if it's true.
But a lot of good shows. A lot of good shows for sure, and it could be true. Germany has very strict.
I think someone said someone on our team just didn't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
Somehow. I don't mean to sound. I'm not dismissing whatever they said. I'm saying I didn't understand. And
Sure. It could be very true that booking shows in Germany right now is arduous and complicated, because that's how things often are here. But there's a lot of really sick tour dates.
Yeah,
nearby.
it's gonna be really fun. We start actually. We got to. I've always wanted to do this. We got to curate a festival. So our first dates are in Utrecht at the Guess Who Festival, which is a really cool festival because they let the headliners of each 3 days gets to book like basically 10 bands that they want to see have on each of their days. So we're the first day, and then Animal Collective booked the day after us, but I think they canceled their whole tour. I don't think they're going out there, but all the bands they booked are still playing. So
cool.
But yeah, so it was really cool to get to book a fest. I've always wanted to do that.
That's very cool. That's awesome. That's at the beginning of the tour?
Yeah, that's the first. Yeah, that's the first date of the tour. Is our first show will be at that fest. Yeah.
Sick.
Yeah.
Great.
I'm trying to think if there's any. I tried. This didn't work. I really tried really hard for them to book Incapacitants. I was like, they were like, okay, who's your dream artist that you want to book? And I was like, Incapacitants. And I'm sure they didn't even reach out.
Who's playing?
I'd have to look at the list. Hold on. Who is playing? Jeff Parker is playing, who is the guitar player famously from Tortoise, but also like a brilliant solo guitar player. He plays on the Clipping album with Ted.
Yes.
There is. I'm really excited to see this dude Aosan. He's a French. I think he's like the future of fucking musique concrète, as far as I'm concerned. It's like halfway between. It's like very much influenced by like super academic computer music, but it's like so massive and like just overpowering and visceral as well. Fucking brilliant. Who else? Divide and Dissolve is a metal duo from Australia.
Cool.
Dos Monos is a Japanese rap group.
Cool.
Dream Crusher is playing. Eviction. Do you know Victoria Eviction?
Yeah.
Yeah, from San Francisco. I didn't actually know her, but now she's like coming with on tour, and we're really excited. I've never seen her play until a couple weeks ago.
I've seen videos, and it looks wild for sure.
Jana Rush. Jana Rush is a footwork producer from Chicago. She was like, when she was super young, she was on Dance Mania Records in Chicago, which is like the Chicago like ghetto house, like just one of my favorite eras of music. And genres and labels.
Cool.
But she does like fucking really super like scattered, complicated footwork production. Now she's super cool. Who else? Yeah. Oh, They Hate Change. There are like a rap group. There are friends from Florida, and Zebra Cats, who is German, or not is German, he's American, but he lives in Germany.
Okay.
Zebra Cats is playing, who's a rapper who like his new album is, or his last album, I guess it's not that new anymore. It's. I think it is. No one made this connection. I think it is much more connected to clipping, or like more like what we want to be associated with than almost anything else. It's like super hard, like cavernous, noisy Berlin techno with rapping.
Cool.
It's fucking awesome. It sounds like one of the tracks sounds like Empty Set made it.
Yeah.
It's like just like super cold, super industrial, but with like really skillful rapping.
Killer.
So I'm excited to see him. That's who's playing on our fest.
Awesome. That sounds great. I wish I could. I mean,
Probably other people that I've forgotten, but
killer.
oh yeah, like Manuka Honey, Nikisi. There's a bunch of other names. I'll whatever. Other people.
We'll put them up there. We'll put them up there on the podcast screen.
Thanks.
So now comes the time of the show where I'd like to ask you. Well, I ask most people their top 5 noise releases of all time, and I ask them their top 5 recent noise releases of all time. But I want to ask you, since you're also a hip hop producer, top 5 noise albums and your top 5 hip hop albums of all time.
Oh man!
I also want to bullshit with you a little bit after that about like newer hip hop and stuff like that.
I was dreading this. I made like all these like lists, and I didn't. I was like, what am I going to fucking say? I feel like the things. I feel like I've covered. I feel like in this conversation, I've covered some of the things that I would actually say are like my top 5 noise releases of all time. It would be like I Have Become the Disease That Made Me by Sickness, Fatale by Pedestrian Deposit. I mean, While You Were Out is like such an obvious answer, but like that changed my life. I wrote about that in my PhD dissertation. But like I feel like I've covered all of those. Or like I also said Bodies Bear Traces of Carnal Violence because I think I think that's maybe the most influential like noise record of I think that like no other album like that launched 1,000 wall projects, I mean like that his impact on noise is so immeasurable, and that when that came out that just fucking cracked everyone's heads open, I mean it was so cool. But let me see. I could make 100 of these. Okay, so I wrote down some other like just early shit that I heard that really meant something to me that I'd never heard anything like before. I'm gonna try and put it in an order.
You don't have to put it in order, and also no stress about this.
Historically, for me, I'm just saying, for me, I'm gonna say like I think there was a tape on his own label called Snuff Electronics by Pain Jerk. It's one of those ones from like 95, 96. That one, I think I would love to hear it again. That one was like I think that was like my one, maybe because that was the one of the couple I had.
Sure.
I had Gallant Gravy also, but like that seems like an obvious answer. Everyone knows that one. But it was called Snuff Electronics, and I would love. I don't think it's online anywhere, and I don't think it's been reissued. But I remember that one being, and that's like the sort of in my head. That's like the quintessential, like perfect, most elegantly assembled Japanese noise with the oscillations and the loops and repeats and just like squiggly but like heavy and crazy and just bright as shit, just like crackling bright, and just like it sounded to me like at that time, I don't know, it sounded to me like hi-fi. Like it sounded like expensive, it sounded bright and clean in a way that like other stuff didn't. So I was like, oh, this is this like, it's like neon noise. It was like fucking, and it's just like, he's got such perfect taste and makes such perfect choices.
Definitely.
That one, if anyone can find that tape, or if someone has it, rip it and upload it so I can hear it again, because all my shit's in storage. Everything I own is in storage in LA, so I couldn't even like go through my tapes. My other, I really was into, I was sort of briefly friends with him. I have no idea where he is now. David Brownstead was 666 volt battery noise. And that was stumbling across him. He had a tape on Slaughter called Family Annihilator, and he had another tape on Mother Savage called Blunt Objects versus Sharp Things.
Yeah.
Both of those were amazing. I was like talking with him. This was like 15 years ago. I was talking to him about reissuing something, but many, many years ago, and we've lost touch. And I actually don't.
I'm sorry to say this, but I'm pretty sure he's passed away. The last time I talked to him, he was very ill, and then I didn't hear from him for like a year. And then I think I asked, like, Ron from Triple R was like, no, he's definitely still alive. And I was like, fuck, he's not calling, he won't pick up the phone if I call, or he won't answer an email. So I just never heard anything. And then I kind of thought maybe I heard he passed away. Yeah. Anyway, we weren't close. I like, a total of like 3 hours on the phone with him over, a year. But but I did really admire those tapes when I found them in high school, and those were like huge for me. Yeah. I mean, I don't know that they're like the best of that like style in that era, but like they were the ones I found. It was like, Borges is the one who played me Texas Chainsaw Dope Fiend the first time, which is like, maybe that is the quintessential like Mother Savage like masterpiece from that era by like a totally obscure, forgotten, also passed away figure of that time. But that was but 666 volt battery noise was really cool. Let's see what else. Oh, and then there's a tape I would love for this to show up somewhere that I could hear it again. Swing Brother Swing by Blister Pack. Yeah.
Blister Pack had one tape on Mother Savage called Trini's Wad.
Trini's Wad, yeah. And
there was the dude from Rend and the dude from Hive.
Right. Yep.
And Plague in Perspective was their label, and there was the double Hive tape, and there was a Rend. Was Rend the one that did Pure, or was that a Pure CD?
I think Rend was on Pure, Probata or something like that.
Yeah. Probata Girder or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, I haven't heard any of that stuff. But Swing Brother Swing was super fucking weird, and I think about it because I couldn't tell if it was like separate songs or if there were weird gaps and silences in the noise. Like, I definitely remember the B-side like would drop to nothing all the time.
Yeah.
So it would be like, so it was almost in like but it had the texture of like that, American just gnarly, just blown out tape shit. Mm-hmm. But like it had these like drops to silence, almost like it was like Kazimoto Endo would do. But it was like, I couldn't, and I remember it was so mysterious to me, and that's why I'm sort of fascinated by it. But I was, that like I never quite knew, was my tape defective? Right. Was this intentional? Are these separate tracks that are all 20 seconds long?
Yeah.
Or is this one piece that incorporates silence? Which, as I've said, like that sort of became interesting to me. I was like, and I just loved that. I'm also obsessed with this idea of like this alien anti-music logic, right? Like even noise, one thing follows another in like often very musical ways, whether or not we like to say it or not, but like, right. This progresses into this and this changes. And I love shit that sounds like aliens made it. Like there isn't a human mind behind it. Like you don't you never make that choice. I don't understand why that's happening. Right? Like I sort of chased that as an idea as well. And that's sort of what I was, a lot of what I would like chase in like the electroacoustic improvisation world, right? One of my favorite, I think one of the most important records to my entire life is a 3-inch CDR by Annetta Krebs called Guitar. Mm-hmm. And it's, I swear to God, it sounded like there was no like, no human mind would put those sounds in that order. Yeah. That's what I thought at the time. And as a result, like that inspired me so much. And I probably I think that's when I decided I was actually going to like try to play music for myself, was hearing this 3-inch CD. That's what else needs it? I'm just like thinking of things that I wish I could, I can't find online that I wish I could hear, that I have like really fun. So, this is here's two from much later, like more like my era when I was already making stuff, but there was a completely mysterious, I think it's a duo or a solo, I don't know, Virgin Spring. They had a tape on Gods of Tundra called Absolute Decline that I just raved and raved and raved about. And I've been bugging Connolly to put it on Bandcamp or something. I think Virgin Spring, it was either 2 guys or 1 guy, and I think it was related to that project KP, which was on Hospital.
Right. Yeah.
But I could be wrong. It was completely mysterious to me.
Did something come out on Hospital also from Virgin Spring?
I think that there were the only 2 I had were both on Gods of Tundra, and the tape I thought was stronger than the LP.
Mm-hmm. It's ringing a bell. Maybe just from that.
All right, I was hearing an echo for a second. Sorry. I hope that's not in the. No, anyway, that is like a really just like. It came at a time where I was like maybe not so interested in harsh noise, because I think it's probably like 2010 or 9 or 10. I'd have to look it up, but it came at a time when I was like maybe not super excited about noise for a little while, and that just was like, oh no, noise is great, noise is the best, I love noise, this makes me love noise. And those so I have so much affection for it. Like it's I would just put it on if I wanted to hear any noise. Like if I had it with me right now and I was like, damn, I want to hear some noise, that's what I might put on.
Killer.
And the other thing, is this 5? I'm going to say this is 5 because I don't remember what I said. But I'm going to say Relay for Death. I think it's called The Birth of an Older, More Ugly Christ. Or Much More Ugly Christ. The Birth of an Older, Much More Ugly Christ.
Is that the one on Hanson with that witch face on the cover? Yeah. Cool.
That just like also like reminds me of a time. I also probably think of it because I also just played a show. One of the Purgist shows was with Roxana and Rachel. Mm-hmm. And I've played with them a couple times before, but I definitely like gushed about how much I love that album to them, probably too much. But yeah, that record that tape at that time, I don't know if it's ever been reissued. I'm not sure, but it was like that cassette was like, and the story of it was so like felt so, because they were like they did they were doing a medical test, like one of those like medical. What do you call them? Medical study.
But yeah. I heard this somewhere.
They were doing a really intense one where they had to lock themselves in. They were like they were testing some drug and they had to be there the whole time, right? For like 15 days, and they could bring whatever they wanted to work on music with. And they made this record in a medical study. And I just remember those old days, like all my noise friends were doing medical studies to like survive. And it's just like, it's so bleak. It's such like a dark idea that you're like putting your own body on the line, taking some experimental drug to like get enough money to fucking eat. But you use this opportunity to like make an amazing noise record on the floor of some like abandoned hospital. Like it's fucking so dark.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was really like that whole image is very moving and profound to me.
Definitely. Cool. That's a great
so,
5. That's a great meaningful 5.
If it was 5.
I think it was 5. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Okay, good.
So now tell me, if you can, your top 5 hip hop records of all time.
Man,
I know it's really, really hard. I mean, of course, it's so vast, but
it's so vast. I mean, the problem is there's like 50. I could name 50, and they could all be number 1 on any given day. You know,
right? Of course.
But so here was my idea, was that I was going to sort of push for maybe some like underheard things that I think could really appeal to. I'll talk about any other record after this, but I made a little list. I don't know how many it is, but like records that might appeal to noise fans, and maybe they're rap albums they haven't really heard.
Yeah.
That's my premise here.
Okay.
I'm going to start with the least likely one, which maybe not is like, isn't actually specific to noise people, but it's just like my favorite album that's never been really reissued. You can't find it anywhere. Is Rappin' Ron and Ant Diddly Dog, Bad Influence. Do you know this?
No.
No. Okay.
So
they were.
I'm not going to know probably most of these.
So they were in the Dangerous crew, which was Ant Banks and Too Short's like crew in the early 90s. They made one album called Bad Influence, and they were like, this is sort of what I was talking about, was like the lyrical versus like the gangster. They were the most lyrical rappers in Oakland at the time. You could not fucking touch them. Yeah. They're just brilliant rappers, but they rapped exclusively about like gangster shit. So it was like, I think that's like a really uniquely like, that's, and I appreciated that, because like you could always point to them and say, you can't say the Bay doesn't have real rappers. Like they were just so, they were just excellent. And I would obsess over all the words. And it's like, and it's early 90s. So it's like, it's kind of grimy. It's kind of tough. It's super inappropriate. There's a lot of like really violent shit on it, but like they're very, very technically excellent rappers. In a way that like the Bay didn't get that kind of credit, because of like, people from New York did not think, they thought E40 was a clown and Too Short was, too simple or whatever. Neither is true. Both geniuses. Yeah. But Rappin' Ron and Ant Diddly Dog. And then I think I think more people should know about Mr. Ivan. So I was obsessed with Cash Money Records in high school. So Cash Money had like 2 distinct periods in the 90s. Before the Hot Boys, there was all these artists that were kicked off the label, some of whom kicked off with some amount of violence, because the founders of the label, Baby and Slim, wanted to start over with their like kid group to go pop, right? To blow up. And they did, and I love the Hot Boys. Lil Wayne's like one of my favorite rappers of all time, and so is Juvenile. But before that, they had this sort of weird collection of rappers. But the great thing about it is Manny Fresh made all those beats too. So he made all the beats and so there's this guy, Mr. Ivan, and it's kind of the closest Cash Money ever got to doing like a horrorcore record. I mean, Mr. Ivan is called 187 in a Hockey Mask is the album. And it's like cold and spooky and mean as shit. And he raps really, really like fast in that like sort of like New Orleans like not as tongue twistery or as like virtuosic as Mystical, but in the way that like a lot of those guys were doing that.
Kind of rushing, like kind of like overfilling the beat, like kind of like
So I think people should listen to Mr. Ivan. Track that down.
It came out on Cash Money.
It's on Cash Money. It's on Cash Money from like before. It's got to be like 93 or 94, something like that. 95. No, maybe 95, 96. I think they were all that stuff's later. So like Cash Money, like I think the first Hot Boys and the first Big Timers start coming out in like 97.
Yeah.
96, 97, something like that. I think just in terms of like, I bet some noise people know about this, but I was going to recommend an underground Memphis tape called The Single by Children of the Corn. Mm-hmm. It is the sonic equivalent of something coming out on like, it sounds like Joe Romer dubbed it on his own tape player kind of thing, but it's a rap album. But it's like a horror rap album from Memphis from the early 90s. Like from that scene that like Tommy Wright and 3-6 came out of.
Right.
Tommy Wright had like 10 Wanted Men, and there was 3-6 like Mystic Styles at the time.
Yeah.
But this is one of these like, this is the absolute grimiest, worst sounding, and as a result, most like evocative and terrifying of that scene, in my opinion. They're called Children of the Corn. That tastes really good. And then I thought maybe, because like, I'm going to name my favorite DJ Screw mixtape, which is Leanin' on a Switch, which is just 2 hours of Lil Kiki and Big Pokey freestyling back and forth. And each of them freestyles, they'll freestyle for like 10 minutes straight and then trade off to the next one. And it's one of the most dazzling. And then of course, the whole thing is slowed down and chopped up by DJ Screw. Yeah. But it's like it's got the vibe of exactly what it is, which is a few people drinking, smoking in a room, playing records, and just rapping over it for an evening. Yeah. And they're just brilliant. And they're like, it's like real freestyling, like totally off the top. So like it's even fun when you hear it sort of like fall apart, and then but then you got this extra layer that like even after that was recorded, then he slowed it down to 80% speed, and then it's got this super weird, like you feel like you are at a party with everyone, and everyone's having fun, but you took the wrong drugs, right? So it's like this amazing atmosphere. Cool. That's one of my favorites. So is that 5?
That's 4.
Right? Crap. Then how about the original Project Blowed compilation, the first one from like, it's got the light bulb on it. It's got. It's got everyone from that. So Project Blowed being this original LA scene. It was a space. It was sort of a venue, and then it was a collective, and it was like all of these. It's like sort of the epicenter of like California art, jazz, rap.
Yeah.
But the original Project Blowed tape is. It's like weird and it's not noisy exactly, but it feels very experimental and off kilter and grimy. And that, so it's got Freestyle Fellowship, it's got Abstract Tribe Unique, it's got Ganja K, it's got Volume 10, it's got the Nonce on it, who had a song called Mixtapes that was sort of vaguely popular at one point, which is a masterpiece. Cool. So that's like a deeply weird glimpse into a scene that like somehow it feels kind of like how like noise compilation tapes in the old days where you're like, I don't know any of these names, and then you're like in this like world, and you're like, how do these, like trying to make connections and figure out how they all know each other or whatever, what's actually going on, or
like what era was Project Blowed roughly? Like what years?
Oh, early 90s to maybe it ended probably in the early 2000s. Okay. Like, I don't know exactly when it would have started. There's a documentary about it by Ava DuVernay, actually. It was at The Good Life. Maybe it was at somewhere before it was The Good Life, but it was, it was like a battle. It was like I didn't live in LA when it happened. I'm friends with a lot of the people who are like the last generation of that, like James. He goes by All City Jimmy now. He used to be No Can Do, and then like Open Mike Eagle, and some of the beat makers, and Bus Driver is like one of the younger guys from that. But there was like, I mean, and yeah, they were like the art scene guys, but Micah Nine, one of the members of Freestyle Fellowship, he ghost wrote raps on the first NWA album. So like there were connections across all of this.
That's crazy.
And like Corrupt, I know like people would talk about like Corrupt used to go to Project Blow to watch people freestyle and shit. But it was this ultra competitive, but also ultra like supportive and positive scene in LA that produced like really, really, really forward thinking rap music at the time. That was like, being in the Bay, I was just like, David and I would have done anything to get to go there. And anytime any of those artists were in the Bay, we'd be at the show. Yeah. But we never actually made it to the real place before it closed down.
Crazy. Yeah, that's interesting because Ted brought that up again. And like, I wasn't nearly that deep into any of this stuff back when I was listening to it, but it was like 15 years since I'd heard that term, and I was like, I think I've only heard it in like songs that reference it, like Abstract Rude and Tribe Unique, or like some Murs songs or something, like it's like stuff that I used to listen to back then. But I didn't have like the whole catalog. I had like maybe like one album by each of these, like one or two albums by each of these artists. So it wasn't like that, but it was like I always heard Project Blood. So when Ted said something about Project Blood, it was like, oh, it was like my Rolodex went like way back, and it's like fuck.
Yeah, Murs would have been there because Murs was in the Bay. He was in a crew called Living Legends.
Exactly. Yeah. And I was really into them.
Murs moved around all the time. He was in like everyone's crew. He was in everyone's scene. Everyone loved that dude.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's mine and David's high school era. Haiku d'Etat was one of a group. AC and Abrud and Micah, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Those names are all just like that's like my high school, but rather like early high school or like late middle school kind of is like when I was like really. But that was all. All those names are just like ringing, like triggering neurons in my brain, just like reconnecting neurons, like crazy.
Yeah, I haven't. I should listen to the comp. It's one of those things where like, I think I played the comp for someone. Like 5 years ago, I played it for someone, and it was one of those things where it's like my mouth just started. I knew every word, but I was like, my brain wasn't thinking of the words. My mouth was just doing it. Yeah. And my brain, if you asked me, I couldn't have come up with I couldn't have kept going if you stopped. But the second it was going, I was like, damn, I do. It's just like muscle memory. I was like, damn, I did memorize this whole tape.
Yeah, it's crazy like that. Wow. It's killer, man. Well, that's a great. Those are great recommendations for sure. That's deep stuff. Those are deep cuts. Now, if you would, before we wrap this up, I usually ask people their top 5 like new rap or new noise, but can you tell me like top 5 new rap? It doesn't have to be albums, but like artists or songs or something like that, because that's something that's also very interesting. Like, what is going on in rap right now?
Let's see what is going on right now. I'm the music supervisor for a TV show that takes place in Oakland, and it's mostly rap in the show. So like I'm very, very regional minded right now. I'm thinking about like what's like, so yeah. I'll start with my favorite current rapper, who also might be my favorite rapper of all time, but I feel conflicted about saying this, and because I don't know. There's some whatever. His name's Mozzie.
Oh, Mozzie, yeah, okay.
My favorite. I think I would argue he's maybe the greatest rapper of all time. I think he's making some weird choices recently. Not the fact that he's in prison. The prison, he needed to serve his time, and it fucking sucks that he's in prison. But he is absolutely the most interesting and skilled rapper around, in my opinion. Now, I think it's one of these weird things where like I tell people this, and no one, like, people. I guess he's like, and I'm not a rapper, but everyone's like, oh, he's like a rapper's rapper. Like other rappers like him, but regular people don't. And I'm like, but I get it, because it's like, it's one of these things where he's like, it sounds so effortless that you can't tell how good he is. Right? It sounds like just everything out of his mouth rhymes, and it's like he's breathing.
Yeah.
Right. And so you don't hear like the work of it. And you don't hear what's so innovative about it. Like, Bay Area stuff like prides itself on its slang. But like when you hear Keek or E40 or something, like the slang really sticks out.
Right.
And the way Mozzie raps, he has the most inventive use of slang, but that it can just breeze right past. And it's almost like it's contextually so perfect that you don't even recognize that it's a slang word, a slang term for something that you've never heard before.
Right.
Because when he says it, you immediately know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
But you don't realize that, like, oh yeah, he said that in a completely new way.
Right.
And like a lot of great rappers, I think he doesn't. I don't think he has a great ear for beats. I think he picks very samey conservative beats. They're all fine, but I would love for him to like rap over something a little more adventurous.
Yeah.
Perhaps not adventurous, but just like not all the same. you know, like.
Interesting. I just actually kind of found out about him like a month or two ago, and haven't been listening to him super hard, but I have listened to a couple of his albums, and definitely, yeah. Okay.
I've seen him in concert like 4 times.
Cool. So who else are some of your favorite rappers? That's interesting. If you say Mozzie might be your favorite rapper of all time, that's. I mean, I took note of him, but now I'll really take note.
I just think he's like there's something about. I mean, I would never make. I'd say he's in the top 5. He's definitely the newest member of the top 5. Mm-hmm. But I also don't have a top 5.
Right.
I would say, it's a top 4, and then 600 people are tied for 5. Right. I couldn't ever. Well, what's new right now? I like this duo from the Bay called Sulan. Mm-hmm. They're really cool. They had a project with Drew Banga. Drew Banga is like killing it right now. He's this producer from the Bay, and he's working with everyone. He's got like a thing with Stunna Man. He's works with just everyone. And Sulan is really cool. What was their? I can't remember what the name of their newest thing was, but it's two ladies. Let's see what else is good. I mean, Larry June is from San Francisco, and he's like super blowing up around here. Everyone's into him. So that's fun for new stuff, because he also sounds like such like cool, laid back, like old school driving stuff, like some sort of hybrid LA, like G-Funk, Bay Area mob music, like stuff. I think he's great. God, who else? I don't know. I talk to David, and I talk about rap every day. I mean, like whatever new shit we're listening to. What have I been listening to? I would have to what is going on here? Oh, I mean, oh God, like I really like this guy, this dude, EBK Jabo from Stockton. Like Stockton really blew up. Young Slow B just died. He was like one of the big names from Stockton, but there's this crew EBK. But EBK Jabo, he's like, he's super, 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 but there's the EBK Young Jabo is my favorite. I'm sorry, EBK Jabo. EBK Young Jock is another one. EBK Jabo is my favorite of them, I think, because I've always liked like remorseful, sad, like the sad gangster, like the Scarface mold like the rapper who just like seems so burdened, and that's why also what I like about Mozzie, right? He's just like so haunted,
Right.
just so sort of burdened. But Jabo, he's got to check out a song called Deathbed, I think it's called. EBK Jabo Deathbed. That one is, they've got this really cool way of, there's this thing in the deathbeds. In the Bay, they've been doing these like, the way they've been like flipping vocal samples from other songs is really, I think, super interesting and innovative. And there's just like this particular drum pattern that's just is like so heavy and aggressive, like this sort of awkward, like not awkward, but just this sort of off kilter stomp that that everyone's using right now. That I think is really great and sounds really new.
Cool.
Yeah, who else? I don't know. What was that? 4? I'm just like only naming Bay Cats too.
I think that's 3 or 4 that was. Yeah, that's awesome, man. And that's great. I'd love to hear some more.
Yeah. Who else is like? I'm trying to think of all the things I've been pitching for the TV show I'm working on. Like, who am I trying to get licenses on the show? Oh, you know, that's what I could have. That was another album I could have said. I just thought of. That's like one of my top albums was Tear Gas by the Jacka.
By who?
The Jacka.
The
You know
Jacka.
the Jacka.
I don't. Yeah, I know the name. Yeah.
He's another Oakland rapper who has passed away a handful of years ago. But Tear Gas is like, I think, one of the most like consistently song to song, like whole, like no skips, great albums from the Bay. Like the Bay doesn't like focus on album stuff. I don't think like people are like album artists the way like New Yorkers are album artists, right? At least in the old days, like they were, right? You don't have like there aren't a lot of Bay Area like only built for Cuban links kind of like, or like even Good Kid, Mad City like album length works. It's like singles, and you know sometimes they add up to something great. Whereas like Tear Gas by the Jacka is like one of the strongest like full albums from the Bay.
Cool.
That was I just looked at my notes again and saw that on there.
Cool.
Yeah, man.
Well, that's perfect. That's awesome. That's super cool, man.
Like,
That's a great job you have too. And that's very interesting. That's.
How long has this been? You can cut this down, right? I can't believe anyone would ever watch this.
We'll keep it. Yeah. I mean, I'll let you go now, but that's, you know, people enjoy. I enjoy a long deep dive into this shit. So I think people will too. If they don't, they can turn it off. But
you can skip forward.
yeah, man. Well, that's super cool, man. I really enjoyed talking to you, and
Yeah,
I feel like I'd love to know more about a lot of the stuff you do, but you know, maybe we'll extend this conversation at a later date.
Yeah, well, we gotta get to Germany anyway, so like, you know, maybe I'll.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
What city are you in?
I'm in Cologne, so
Oh,
it's
we played in Cologne. I love Cologne.
yeah, it's not far from the Netherlands. I'll look at the dates again and see if there's any way. I mean,
It's
I don't know.
a week from today. It's Friday. So
Yeah,
if there's,
I'll look
if there's any way you're on the list, man. If you can do it, I'll put you on the
Okay.
list. No problem.
Cool. Well, I'll see if I can make something happen. It's kind of like
But if
resign
not,
myself to, like,
no worries, no pressure. I know we're
I'd love to. I'd really love to.
But we gotta get to Cologne like probably next year sometime. Like we have to play Germany. Like we have like we always play Germany. Like,
Yeah,
we
I'm
have
sure you guys
fans
have tons of
in
fans.
Germany.
I mean, Cologne is one thing. But I figure you guys must have crazy fans in Berlin. I mean, Berlin's a big city to
Berlin
play.
and Hamburg.
Yeah.
We did a whole tour of just Germany once. We played in Cologne, we played in Erfurt, we played in Nuremberg, we played in Leipzig.
Hip hop is really big here.
Yeah,
It
it's
is.
fucking always fun.
Yeah.
Love it.
I haven't gone any rap shows. I was gonna go see Key Glock. I was thinking about going to see Key Glock because he was playing not far away,
shit.
but I didn't because it's just a travel and money issue. But I should start paying more attention to like rappers that are coming through Cologne and
rap shows are like live rap is so weird because it's like I either like the best like they're the most technical and like the most put together show, or I like the most disastrous show. Like Mozzie shows are like there's 40 dudes all in red on stage.
Yeah.
They're just playing the song with the vocals and everything. You can't tell whose verse it is. Everyone's just like filming the audience and rolling blunts. Just like
exactly.
Chaos.
Yeah,
and I love that.
Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, I have seen some. It seems like people really like to do the just playback and kind of say the last like word of every verse and or the first, and then I don't know.
Yeah.
I did just see Kendrick Lamar in Paris.
Kendrick is like also just like wow, it's like perfect. His shows are just unbelievable.
Dude, it was insane. It was unreal.
I didn't see this tour. I wish I had.
It was amazing.
I saw the previous one and it was fucking incredible.
It was phenomenal.
I mean,
actually,
he's unquestionably. I mean, he's in my top 5 favorite rappers forever. I mean,
absolutely.
He's Good Kid, Mad City is one of the most important albums to me that's ever come out in my lifetime. It's like that and Purple Rain by Prince are my 2 favorite albums since I've been born.
Yeah. No, he's huge. He's super, super important. God, he's
just so good. It's just, it's impossible. You're just like, fuck, how are you this good?
But that was a show. I mean, that was a show where no backing, very very little backing tracks, and he was really vocally delivering the entire show and running his ass off and doing everything. And then, actually, coincidentally, when we bought tickets to the show, it was for our honeymoon like 6 months ago or whatever, and it got announced.
Congratulations!
Thank you. And it was like, oh, we're gonna go, and then like we're gonna go to Paris and like see him there, and then like a week beforehand, he was like, and I've decided I'm gonna stream this show on Amazon or whatever, and so. It's actually we haven't looked at it, but like there were like crazy camera crews like running around the entire time. I was at that one. Watch it. We were there. I mean, it was amazing.
Nice.
We got to download it before it like disappears and just hold on to it.
I know.
Like a memento, because it was incredible.
It'll never actually go away, so you'll always be able to bootleg it somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Cool, man. Well, let's keep in touch, and I will talk to you soon. Thank you so much for taking the time.
This was so fun.
And we'll take care and talk soon.
All right. Later.
All right, bye. Thank you for tuning in to White Centipede Noise Podcast. That was William Hutson of Clipping, RALE, and Tattered Syntax. Head over to patreon.com/White Centipede Noise now to support the show and see more.